So much of what I have learned from reading a very special book. And this information I'm giving you, the beginning of my eyes opening and me becoming more aware and beginning to understand life a little better, started with reading this book. And as I've read the book, and as I continue to read the book, my understanding is growing. And this book is called In the Light of Truth. Let's see. This is the title, In the Light of Truth. It's also called The Grail Message. And this book comes in 3 volumes. So it's not a book that you can just read quickly. It's a book that addresses every possible aspect of existence, spiritual, physical, material, our mental functioning, our emotional functioning, the, the world around us, nature, and the principles that drive everything in the universe. And these principles are principles that have been put into the universe right from the beginning of the universe. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read some excerpts from a chapter in the book. I'm going to read this chapter called Temperament. So you have an idea of how I arrived at my understanding. But my understanding is also related to my experience. And I begin to realize that there's all this information that is available, but you have to search for it yourself and read it and dig into it yourself and apply it to yourself if you want to be able to help yourself. Okay. So this book was written by a German, and he used the pen name Abd Rushin. And this particular chapter that I'm going to read to you is in the 3rd volume. So, but when you read the book, or if you get the book, you have to start with the 1st volume and work your way through to the 3rd volume. He was a German. He wrote the book originally in German. And when I first read the book, I read it in English, which was an English translation from the 1950s and 1970s. Later on, I decided to try to read the original writing in German, the original book in German, which I was lucky to do. And after I did that, I realized that it might be easier to grasp the concepts in the book if I could put it in more simple English, as closely aligned to the simplicity of the language which the author himself used in German. So I'm going to read to you my rudimentary translation. The sense and the meaning is still the same. The words may be a little bit different from the book that you have if you already bought the book. The book is available. It's available on Amazon. It's available from the publisher. You just have to put in the light of truth and you find it. So I'm going to read excerpts from this chapter, not the whole chapter because we don't have enough time for all that. And this is chapter number 15 in the third volume. The title is Temperament. There are humans who excuse so many of their faults as being due to temperament, even to themselves. Such behavior is wrong. Whoever does this shows that he has only become a slave to himself. The human is from spirit. Spirit, which remains the highest one, conscious of self in subsequent creation. And through this, he exerts an impression upon, he forms, and he leads everything else, regardless of whether this exerting of an impression lies in his full conscious volition or whether he knows nothing at all of it. It is not without justification that there is the frequently popular saying about this or that characteristic of a human, that it is in his blood. This saying in most instances is meant to express inherited. And this is often also the case since coarse material heredity does occur, whereas spiritual heredity is impossible. In the spiritual, the law of attraction of the same kind comes into consideration. And the effect of this law externally in earth life has the appearance of a heredity. And for this reason, it can easily be confused with material heredity. Temperament, however, comes from the material existence and is therefore partly inherited. Popular sayings speak of light blood, hot blood, heavy blood, or easily aroused blood. All these designations refer to the temperament, with the quite correct intuition that the blood plays the greatest role in this. In reality, it is a specific emitted radiation which develops through the nature of the composition of the blood in each case, which then primarily induces a corresponding release of a trigger in the brain, which in turn makes itself strongly noticeable in the feeling of the entire body. Now, we talked about that at the last meeting when we talked about how your emotions then travel to your brain and then become thoughts, which become feelings. And for anyone who was not at the last meeting, you can watch it on YouTube. Going back to the chapter. In the healthy blood of a human are anchored all the emitted radiations which blood can generally produce, and with that, all the temperaments. I speak here always only of the healthy earthly body, because illness brings confusion in the radiations. With the age of the earthly body, the composition of the blood also changes. With the change of the healthy blood with age, there also occurs simultaneously a corresponding change of temperament. Besides the age of the body, still other things contribute to the alteration of the blood. Thus, the kind of zone in which the person lives and everything belonging to it, the climate, the radiation of the stars, the kind of diet, and still many other things. They have a direct effect on the temperaments because they belong to matter, to the material existence, and are therefore also very closely connected with it. In general, people distinguish four basic temperaments of the human, according to which humans themselves are also designated, such as sanguine, melancholic, choleric, and phlegmatic. But in reality, there are 7. And if you count all the sub-steps, there are even 12. However, the main ones are 4. With totally healthy blood, the temperaments can be divided into 4 age periods in which the blood composition changes. First, we have childhood, which is like the sanguine temperament of carefree living in the moment. Later, the age of youth or of the young man or young woman, which is like the melancholic temperament of yearning, dreaminess. Then the age of the mature man or woman, which is like the choleric temperament of action. And finally, old age, which is like the phlegmatic temperament of calm reflection. For this reason, the age of young manhood and young womanhood is a time of melancholic temperament, because only with the breaking through of the spirit in the sexual power does the complete and unbroken connection occur with the various kinds in creation. Now, fully responsible for every single thought, for every word, and for every one of his deeds, because all the vibrations of every thought, every word, and every one of his deeds pass with full power through the planes of the various kinds of beingness, exerting pressure, and with that, creating form. Now, we talked about this at the last meeting too, which is that all your thoughts, all your words, and all your deeds create forms. These forms may be invisible to you, but they're very real, and they surround you and surround your surroundings. So going back to the chapter, through this, forms come into existence in subsequent creation according to the kind to which the human gives birth in his vibrations. So every thought, every word, every deed gives birth to forms, and these forms are around you constantly. Therefore, if a human is unrestrained in his temperament, he creates unhealthy new forms in creation, which can never engender harmony. Rather, they must have a disturbing effect on everything that exists. The human must now remember this at every moment. He constantly creates new forms in this subsequent creation with every single thought, every stirring of his soul. Make this clear to yourselves for once. You are indeed responsible for it, and everything which you also form in your existence hangs upon you. The good draws you up high. The base must drag you down according to the law of gravity, which absolutely takes effect regardless of whether you know of it or whether you do not care about it at all. It works and takes effect around you in constant weaving. In fact, you are now the starting point of everything which must be formed and which must be created in this loom at which you are weaving. However, you cannot halt it for even one instant. For once, only make this one picture clear to yourselves. It must be enough to shock you out of the trivialities for which you are often willing to sacrifice so much time and power. It must cause you to be horrified at the frivolity with which you carried on your life so far, and cause you shame before your Creator, who gave you such a great thing with it. But you did not respect it. You toyed with this enormous power, only to the detriment of subsequent creation, which was entrusted to you, and which you can form into paradise for yourselves if you finally want to do so. Consider that the whole tangle which you have brought about in your ignorance of these laws must now confuse and press you down. It is your fault that you are not yet acquainted with them. It is the most sacred duty for you to concern yourselves with them, since you stand in creation. Instead of that, the human mocked and derided the messengers who could show you a path that must bring recognition. However, no prize is won without effort. It is against the law of constant movement in creation, the law which contributes to preservation and continuance. The law of movement in spirit and of body. Everything which does not move or does not move in the right manner becomes expelled because it only brings disturbance in the vibrating harmony of creation. It becomes expelled as a sick item which does not want to move in rhythm with creation. I already spoke to you about the necessity for constant movement as a law. So, the human spirit must also stand above the temperaments, restrain and control them, so that with this, harmony becomes restored, first in his own body, and then benevolently extended to the nearer surroundings, which by radiation then has a formative effect in the entire subsequent creation. The human who makes good use of all four temperaments, one after the other, at the appropriately necessary times, only such a human really stands firmly in this creation. For he needs these temperaments to climb securely and with certainty up the steps of his earth life, and to not neglect anything which is necessary for the maturity of his spirit. Temperaments, well controlled and put to good use, are like good boots on the path through matter and on earth. Pay more attention to them than you have done up till now. You cannot do without them, but you must also never give way to them, for otherwise they become tyrants which torture you instead of being of benefit to you, and also to your surroundings as well. But do use them. They are the best guiding companions on your path through your earthly existence. They are friends to you if you control them. The child thrives best when he is sanguine. Therefore, it is intended for him through the composition of his blood. The blood composition changes at the time of development of physical maturity and then brings with it the melancholic temperament. This is now in turn the best helper for the time of maturation. It can give the spirit a direction towards the light, towards purity and faithfulness in the years when he must become fully connected with creation. And with this, he intervenes in a leading manner in the entire weaving and in all the working which is in constant movement around him in creation. In this way, it can become the greatest helper to the human spirit in his actual existence, much more incisively than he can now imagine. For this reason, the child must be allowed the untroubled joy of the moment, which the sanguine temperament gives him. However, the young man and young woman must also be allowed this healthy daydreaming that is peculiar to youth. Whoever wrecks this daydreaming in order to bring these young humans back to the soberness of their surroundings becomes a brigand, waylaying the spirit on its paths towards the light. Beware of this, for all the consequences from it will also fall upon you. Choleric temperament in clarified form is needed by every man or woman of action. In clarified form, I say quite expressly, for the spirit must govern in the years of manhood and womanhood. The spirit must ennoble and illumine everything, must transmit light rays and spread them into the entire creation. However, in old age, the phlegmatic temperament contributes to the gradual loosening of the spirit more and more from the body. To looking back over the experiences of the time on earth so far, examining them once again in order to retain the lessons from them firmly as his own, and in this way gradually prepare himself for the necessary step into the fine matter of creation, which is made easier for him through this. It becomes a quite natural event that only signifies progress in compliance with the laws of this creation, but no pain. Therefore, respect and foster the temperaments wherever you can, but always only at their respective times, so long as they are not tyrants due to an unrestrained manner. Whoever wants to alter them or suppress them destroys the best help for the God-willed evolution of the earth human. He also disturbs the health and brings confusion as well as unimaginable side effects, which visit upon humankind strife, envy, hate, anger, even robbery and murder, because the temperaments at their necessary times were disregarded and disrupted by the cold intellect when they were meant to be fostered and heeded. The temperaments are given to you from God's will in the laws of nature, which are always maintained for you by the beings and kept fresh for you so as to ease the path of your journey through earth life, if you tread the path in the sense willed by God. Thank the Lord for it and joyfully take up the gifts which lie ready for you everywhere in creation. Just exert yourselves to finally recognize them correctly. So, this book, I would urge you to take the time to read it. I could do 1,000 workshops in, in my lifetime, and you would not get what you would get from reading the book yourself. It's not an easy book to read, but it's a book that demands spiritual as well as mental and physical exertion to read. But what you will get out of it is yours, and you will take it with you for the rest of your existence. And that's the reason to read it. You can buy it on Amazon, you can buy it on the website of the publisher. The book is also called The Grail Message, and the website is grailmessage.com. Very simple, grailmessage.com. If you are already reading the book, if you've already read it to the end, my suggestion is go back to the very beginning. And this time, when you pick up the book, empty your mind of everything else, of all your problems, and simply open yourself up and ask for what lesson you need to learn to come to you through what you're reading. And each person's is at a different place in their life path. Each person is learning a different lesson from the next person. But this book speaks to you as an individual. It talks to you as a human spirit. And it encourages you to begin to live your life as a human spirit.